the swing set in autumn. The backyard had always belonged to Nathan. Even as children, it was his kingdom, sprawling green grass trimmed like a golf course, a sandbox with trucks he no longer used, and in the far corner, the wooden swing set Thomas built one summer while Sophia watched from the kitchen window. But on that one rare October afternoon, the yard became hers, and it would become the memory she returned to when she needed to remember who she really was. It was the fall before she turned 12. The air had just started to carry that crispness that hinted at change. Golden leaves covered the yard like scattered memories, and the sun hung low, casting long shadows across the lawn. Nathan was at a baseball practice. Their mother was out shopping for centerpieces for the Thanksgiving dinner she hosted like a military operation. And their father had retreated into the garage, tinkering with his tools, occasionally cursing at a stripped screw or a rusted nail. Sophia wandered outside with a sketchpad clutched to her chest, the spiral binding catching the edge of her sleeve. She wore a faded hoodie and mismatched socks pulled high over her jeans. She knew better than to ask anyone where she was going. She climbed onto the swing set, the one Nathan had long outgrown and Sophia was never really invited to use, and began to rock slowly back and forth. The creaking of the chains was rhythmic, almost like a lullaby, and her sketchpad opened in her lap. She started to draw. Not just anything. She drew the house as it looked in her mind. Not the real one with its granite counters and perfectly folded throws, but the one she wished for. The one where her parents' faces turned toward her in admiration instead of polite tolerance. Where her artwork hung on the walls beside Nathan's trophies. Where the kitchen fridge had her ribbon pinned right at the center. A house where she wasn't a guest in her own home. As the drawing took shape, she didn't notice the wind picking up or the soft footsteps behind her. Not until she heard her father's voice. "You always draw girls with long hair," Thomas said casually, standing at the edge of the porch with a screwdriver still tucked behind one ear. Sophia tensed, unsure what to say. He rarely talked to her one-on-one. She flipped the page closed, embarrassed. "I guess," she mumbled, not meeting his eyes. Thomas walked a little closer, his boots crunching on the dry leaves. "Looks good," he offered, nodding toward the sketchpad. "You still doing that art club thing?" She hesitated. "Yeah. I won a regional prize last week." He nodded absently. "Nathan's coach wants him to try out for varsity already. He's only 14. Of course, that was what followed. Sophia looked down at her page, the lines now blurred from the edge of her palm. The swing slowed. Silence stretched between them like fabric pulled too tight. But then something happened she didn't expect. Thomas sighed and sat down on the second swing, the one beside her. She couldn't remember the last time he'd done that. "It's hard," he said, not looking at her. "Being the one that no one really knows what to do with." Sophia turned her head slowly. "What?" He kept staring straight ahead. "You remind me of my sister. She was like you. Quite. Always off in her own world. My parents didn't get her either." Sophia had never heard him speak of any sister before. "She ran away when she was 18, Thomas said, almost to himself. "Moved to Portland. Married a poet. My dad said she was wasting her life." He paused. "She never came back." Sophia swallowed, unsure if she should speak. Her heart pounded in a slow, dull ache. "Did you miss her?" she asked. Thomas didn't answer at first. Then he said, "Sometimes I think about the last time we talked. She showed me a drawing once, said it was how she saw the world. I laughed at it. Told her it didn't make sense. She never showed me anything again after that." Sophia stared at him, the air around them so still it made the creaking swing sound like a drumbeat. "I was just a kid," he added. "Didn't realize I was supposed to be listening." The wind lifted the corner of her sketchpad. Thomas stood. Then, with a hand still dusty from sawdust, he gently tapped the edge of her paper. "Don't stop drawing, Sophia." And with that, he turned and walked back toward the garage. The silence that lingered. She never knew what to make of that afternoon. It didn't become a pattern. He never brought it up again. There was no magical change in the household dynamic. At dinner that night, the conversation resumed its usual rhythm. Nathan's stats, Nathan's classes, Nathan's everything. But that moment on the swing became a lighthouse in the years to come. It was the first time she saw a crack in the stone of her father's indifference. Not enough to pour through, but enough to know that once, just once, he had almost seen her. Years later, in the ICU. When Sophia lay in the ICU, 1,000 tubes mapping her pain, she remembered that swing. She remembered the wind and the leaves and the sketchpad on her lap. She remembered that she wasn't invisible then. Not entirely. And it was enough to make her fight. Not for them. Not anymore. But for herself. Because buried in the corners of her childhood were moments like that, moments she had almost been chosen. And now, years later, as Jessie held her hand and whispered that she was loved and safe, Sophia realized something else. She no longer needed almost. She had found entirely. In Jessie. In herself. In the sketchpad that had never judged her, never ignored her, and always told the truth. She had drawn a new life. And this time, she was at the center of the page. The night the body broke and the heart did too. It started with a tremble. Sophia had woken up that morning the way she always did, with stiffness in her joints, a low hum of pain in her wrists, and that shadow of fatigue she had grown used to carrying like a second skin. It was just another Thursday. The kind of day you endure rather than remember. She made coffee, toasted a bagel, answered a few emails from clients. Her cat, Pepper, curled by her feet. Normal. Manageable. Until it wasn't. By noon, the ache had turned sharp. A pressure gathered in her chest like something pressing inward, like the air had grown thick and hard to pull through her lungs. She reached for her phone and texted her mother. Flare-up. Fever's climbing. Chest tight. Might head to urgent care. The response came 20 minutes later. Sweetheart, you always overdo it when you're stressed. Drink water and rest. You'll feel better by morning. Her father followed up with, remember when Nathan had mono and still played the championship game? You've always been a little sensitive. Try Tylenol. That word, sensitive, sat in her throat like a splinter. By 2 p.m., she had stopped responding to Slack messages. By 3, she couldn't lift her arm without pain radiating down her side. She lay down on the couch, dizzy, sweat forming along her hairline though she was freezing. Her vision blurred. She tried calling Jessie, her roommate. Straight to voicemail. Detroit, conference. Sophia whispered, remembering. She stood slowly, legs trembling, and staggered to the bathroom. 12 steps. That was all. She made it to 8. Sophia collapsed on the cold tile floor, her body folding in on itself. The room spun in violent loops. Her head throbbed. Her lungs felt underwater. Her mouth opened to call out, but no sound came. Then, everything went black. The return. It was the sound of a key in the door that saved her. Jessie's heels clacked across the hardwood floor, her suitcase thudding against the wall. She was muttering about the canceled flight, about traffic on I-5, about needing a nap. She set her purse on the table and called out. Soph. Silence. Hey, I'm back early. Want Thai or? She froze at the open bathroom door. Sophia was crumpled on the floor, one arm twisted beneath her, lips pale, cheeks flushed with fever. Oh my God. Jessie's scream didn't echo, it sliced. She dropped to her knees, fingers fumbling for Sophia's pulse. Too fast. Skin burning. Her friend's breaths were shallow and fast, her body soaked with sweat. Stay with me, Jessie whispered, already dialing 911. Please, please stay with me. The emergency room. The paramedics came in a whirl of blue gloves and clinical words. Jessie barely remembered the ride in the ambulance, except for Sophia's head rocking gently on the stretcher, a nurse barking terms like systemic inflammatory response, possible sepsis, and multi-organ failure. At the ear, machines came to life, blinking, beeping, measuring the unraveling of a body that had spent too many years being ignored. The attending physician, Dr. Wilson, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that didn't flinch, examined Sophia carefully. She's critical, she told Jessie. We're moving her to ICU. Tonight is important. She's in a storm. A storm. Jessie repeated. It's what we call a cytokine storm. Her immune system is attacking everything. Jessie clenched her jaw. What do we do? You stay, Dr. Wilson said gently. You love her. That might be the most powerful medicine in the room tonight. The visitors who didn't stay. Thomas and Caroline Wallace arrived just after 6 p.m. Caroline wore heels that clicked too loudly on the linoleum. Her makeup was flawless. Thomas had a Bluetooth earpiece tucked into his right ear, checking stock alerts between glances at the monitors. Caroline looked at the machines. So, all this is because of lupus? She always makes things sound worse than they are, Thomas muttered. Dr. Wilson joined them shortly after. She explained the condition, the lab results, the grave reality. She might not survive the night, she said plainly. Silence. Then Caroline opened her clutch. Nathan's engagement party starts at 7. We should probably go freshen up. Thomas looked at his watch. We'll swing by tomorrow. Send updates? Jessie didn't say a word. She just stared, wide-eyed, as the two people who created Sophia chose Prosecco and party favors over the child fighting for breath in the next room. When they left, they didn't even glance back. The real family. Jessie sat beside Sophia, holding her hand. The machines beeped. Her temperature climbed. 1 hour bled into another. The sky outside the ICU window turned purple, then black. Dr. Wilson checked in, adjusted meds, whispered something hopeful but cautious. At 2:12 a.m., Sophia seized briefly, muscles tensing, face contorting in a grimace that made Jessie cry out. Nurses rushed in. Oxygen levels dropping. Blood pressure falling. Chest compressions were almost considered. Then, stabilization. Barely. Jessie leaned forward, forehead touching the back of Sophia's hand. You are not allowed to go, she whispered. Not like this. Not while I'm still here. Sophia didn't respond, but her fingers twitched. The point of no return. By 4:37 a.m., Sophia's fever broke. Her breathing steadied. The lab results still screamed danger, but something had shifted. A choice, maybe. A moment of defiance. Somewhere beneath the haze of morphine and fever, Sophia clawed her way back toward consciousness. She couldn't speak. She couldn't move. But she could feel. And what she felt was this. Not the absence of her parents. Not the betrayal. But the warmth of Jessie's hand wrapped around hers. A quiet insistence, you matter. I'm staying. The aftermath. When morning sunlight sliced through the blinds, Sophia opened her eyes. Only for a second. But long enough to see Jessie asleep in the chair beside her, still in business casual, hair a mess, lips slightly parted. Sophia's throat burned. Her chest ached. Her limbs were heavy. But her heart beat with a new clarity. She would never beg for love again. She would never apologize for being sick. She would never shrink herself into the space her parents left behind. Because this woman asleep in a hospital chair, holding her hand through the night, that was family. And Sophia? She had finally chosen herself. The night the world split in two. It began with a silence. Not the comforting kind, the type that tucks you in at night like a lullaby. This one was sharp, cold. The sterile hush of a hospital room where the only voices are machines, beeping in chaotic rhythm, trying to keep a body alive. Sophia was still. Not by choice. Her body had gone into freefall. At 1:07 a.m., her oxygen levels dropped to 83. By 1:14, her blood pressure was sliding fast. 90/60. 84/50. Her fever climbed to 105.6, and even the cooling blankets had lost their effect. Dr. Wilson barked orders from the foot of the bed, her voice cutting through the fog like a flare in the night. Start norepinephrine. Stat call respiratory. She's crashing. Sophia's lungs wheezed under the strain of every breath. Her skin had gone a pale, almost translucent gray. Sweat clung to her like a second skin. Jessie didn't move from her side. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She held Sophia's hand like it was the last rope tying her friend to this earth. And in a way, was. Elsewhere, champagne. Across the city, in a ballroom glistening with white linens and expensive lighting, Caroline laughed as the photographer snapped a photo of the family around the engagement cake. Thomas raised his glass in a toast. Nathan beamed in his tailored suit. Vanessa, the picture-perfect fiancée, dazzled in silk. People clapped. Flashbulbs went off. No one mentioned Sophia. Caroline's phone sat on silent in her purse. Thomas's remained in his coat pocket. There was wine, dancing, toast after toast, and not a single word about the daughter in ICU, her body at war with itself. It was as though she never existed. The second time. At 2:11 a.m., Sophia flatlined for 3 seconds. 3 heartbeats gone. Nurses moved with choreographed urgency. Jesse had to step back as the crash cart rolled in. CPR wasn't needed yet, but adrenaline was pushed. Alarms screamed. Dr. Wilson's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted Sophia's breathing mask. But then, the pulse. Faint, slow, like the tap of a drum after a war. "She's fighting," a nurse whispered. "God, she's still fighting." Jessie dropped back into the chair and gripped Sophia's hand again, her own nails digging into her palm. "You are not going to leave me," she whispered. "Not like this." The still morning, when the sun began to rise, pale, diluted through the frosted glass of the ICU, Sophia was still alive. She wasn't out of danger, but the numbers had stopped falling. Her heart rate had steadied to 97 BPM. Her fever dropped below 103 for the first time in hours. Her lungs wheezed but moved with a rhythm that promised something like hope. Jessie had not slept. She sat with bloodshot eyes, her cheek resting on Sophia's arm, not daring to leave even to eat. Nurse Linda entered at 6:03 a.m. Older, with short silver curls and a walk that said she'd seen too many endings, Linda began checking the 4 bags. "She's a tough one," she muttered softly. "Really gave us a run for it." Then she paused, noticed the empty coffee cup in Jessie's hand. "You need to rest, sweetheart." Jessie shook her head. "Later." Linda sighed, walked over to the opposite side of the bed, and pulled the blanket over Sophia's legs with practiced tenderness. "You know," Linda said, "my husband left me during chemo." Jessie blinked. "I was 34. Stage 2 breast cancer. First day of treatment, he drops me off, says he has a golf game, and never comes back. Didn't even text." Jessie didn't speak. She just watched. Linda smoothed the sheet again. "He didn't come to the hospital once. Said he couldn't handle it. Said it made him feel helpless. You know what really makes you feel helpless?" She gestured around the room. "This. Machines beeping, tubes everywhere, a woman barely holding on, and the people who were supposed to love her? Gone." She looked down at Sophia, who was still unconscious but breathing. "Some people disappear when things get hard," Linda continued. "And some people, they show up." She turned to Jessie. "You showed up." Jessie swallowed hard. "She's my family." Linda smiled. "Then she's lucky." Waking. Sophia's first sensation was cold. Not freezing, but distant, like her body had been asleep in snow. Aching. A deep soreness behind her eyes, a dull roar in her chest. Voices were soft, distant, like underwater radio. Then warmth. Something pressed against her hand. She squeezed. Not intentionally. It was more reflex than thought. But that tiny motion brought a gasp from the chair beside her. "Sophia?" It was Jessie's voice. Tired. Correct. Hopeful. "You're back. Oh my God, you're really..." She trailed off, overwhelmed. Sophia's eyelids fluttered. Ships. Color. Her gaze landed on Jessie. There was no smile. No dramatic music. Just the truth of that moment, heavy and gentle all at once. "You stayed," Sophia whispered, her voice hoarse. "Of course I did," Jessie said softly. "Where else would I be?" Absence. At 9:13 a.m., Sophia's phone buzzed. Not a call. A notification. Someone had tagged her in a photo. Jessie picked it up, unsure whether to show her. But Sophia nodded. She already knew. The image loaded slowly, revealing a picture of her parents clinking champagne glasses under a string of fairy lights. Nathan and Vanessa at the center, grinning. Everyone glowing with joy. No missed calls. No texts. Just filtered smiles and ice buckets. Sophia stared for a long time. Then she turned her face to the window. Outside, the sky was soft with morning. She let her breath settle. "I almost died," she whispered. Jessie didn't answer. Because what could she say to that? The realization. It wasn't a breakdown. It wasn't screaming or sobbing or anything Hollywood would have made it. It was a stillness. A quiet cracking open. Sophia's voice returned later that day, piece by piece. She spoke to Linda as the nurse checked her vitals. "Thank you," Sophia murmured. Linda looked up. "For what?" "For the story you told Jessie," Sophia said. "About your husband." Linda offered a tight smile. That old thing." "It mattered," Sophia whispered. "It helped." Linda leaned down. "Sweetheart, illness has a way of shaking the leaves off the trees. And when the storm passes, you see who was holding on." She straightened the blanket one last time. "I hope you remember who stayed." Sophia did. She always would. The room was quieter now. The ICU machines still beeped, of course, but softer, steadier, almost as if they had exhaled. Morning light filtered through the blinds in pale gold ribbons. It smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. Someone, probably Linda, had left a lavender sachet under Sophia's pillow during the night. Sophia blinked slowly, letting the light settle into her eyes. Something had changed. Not the pain, that was still there, a dull weight pressing against her ribs. Not the fatigue, that curled around her bones like vines. But something deeper. The storm had passed. And what remained was clarity. An honest awakening. For the first time in years, Sophia didn't immediately reach for her phone. She didn't check for texts. She didn't brace herself for disappointment disguised as parental concern. She just breathed. Jessie sat curled in the corner of the room, legs tucked beneath her, asleep in the chair she had refused to leave. Her sweatshirt was rumpled, her face soft and peaceful. There was a kind of love in her posture, an unspoken promise in the way her hand still reached, even in sleep, towards Sophia's bed. Sophia stared at her for a long time, then turned to the ceiling. How long had she chased love like this? Running laps around her parents' silence. Sending pictures of award certificates, press mentions, gallery openings. Always hoping this time would be the moment they saw her. Not what she did. Not what she produced. But her. Sophia. Alive. Fragile. Enough. The realization came quietly, like the closing of a book you hadn't realized you'd already finished. They were never going to give her the love she needed. Maybe that wasn't her fault. Maybe that had never been her job. The letter. Later that morning, Jessie stirred awake and moved beside Sophia, brushing hair from her friend's forehead. "You scared the hell out of me," she whispered. Sophia's voice was raspy but clear. "I scared myself." They didn't say much more. Sometimes, love doesn't need to speak. But when Jessie offered later that day, "We have a spare room. You and I, we can make this work. AL's already on board," Sophia didn't hesitate. She nodded, tears springing into her eyes, not from sadness, but relief. It was time to stop chasing. It was time to come home. To herself. They brought her a laptop that afternoon. Sophia had asked Jessie for it in a whisper, her voice still thin, but her will unmistakably strong. Al had wiped it clean, polished the screen. He even included a small sticky note on the keyboard. "No one gets to define your worth. Write like you know that." Sophia opened a blank document and began to type. The words came like water breaking through a dam. Not angry. Not even cold. Just clear. "Dear Mom and Dad, I survived." That's not sarcasm. I say it because it's true and miraculous. Because there was a night just days ago when every machine around me screamed. When the nurses whispered. When the doctors said the words no child should ever hear. She might not make it to morning. And you weren't there. You showed up for 27 minutes. And then left, to go toast Nathan. I don't hate you. But I cannot ignore the truth anymore. You raised 2 children. But only one of us got to be your son. The rest of us learned how to survive in the shade. I've spent my life trying to earn your love, as if love was something I had to qualify for. I thought if I just tried hard enough, got sick less, achieved more, complained less. Eventually, I would deserve it. But that's not how love works. Love doesn't arrive only when convenient. Love doesn't show up in gowns and glitter and leave when things get uncomfortable. Love stays. Jessie stayed. She held my hand through the seizures, through the worst of the fevers. She wiped my forehead with a cool cloth while you were raising glasses of champagne. She is not blood, but she is family. From here forward, I will protect myself, not from illness, but from conditional affection. This is not punishment. This is not revenge. This is protection. I'm choosing to heal, in every way. And that healing cannot include people who only show up when the room smells like flowers, not antiseptic. If you wish to be part of my future, it must begin with truth and boundaries. I will not be reaching out. You may contact me only through email for now. I will reply if and when I feel safe to. I wish you peace. I wish you clarity. But I no longer wait for your love to define mine. Sophia. She signed it, saved it, printed it, folded it neatly into an envelope and handed it to Linda. Could you? She asked. Linda nodded solemnly. Of course, sweetheart. And with that, the girl who once clung to every sliver of hope tucked her worth into a white envelope and let go. The arrival. Caroline and Thomas showed up the next afternoon. Of course. Caroline wore a cream-colored blouse, her hair immaculate. Thomas still had his work badge clipped to his belt. They walked in with the hurried discomfort of people checking something off a to-do list. Linda greeted them calmly. Room 308? Caroline asked. Our daughter is there. Sophia Wallace. Linda paused. She was discharged this morning. Both parents blinked. What? Caroline said, frowning. No one told us. She left with her care coordinator and roommate. She's recovering at home. Thomas exhaled like someone mildly inconvenienced at the airport. Well, can we get her discharge papers or? Linda held out the envelope. She left this for you. Caroline took it gingerly, as though the paper might bite. Thomas peered over her shoulder. As they stood in the sterile white corridor, Linda watched them closely. Caroline opened the letter. Her face changed. Not dramatically, but like someone slowly waking up to a noise they'd ignored for years. Thomas's expression hardened, then faltered. The hallway remained quiet. No protests. No arguments. Just the slow, dawning weight of what they had refused to see. Linda, still calm, still professional, said one final thing before returning to her post. She almost died. Twice. While you were drinking champagne. Caroline didn't respond. Thomas folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope with trembling hands. And they left. Without a word. Freedom in stillness. Back at Jessie and AL's apartment, Sophia sat by the window, legs tucked under her, sipping ginger tea. The city stretched outside, a mosaic of noise and life. It felt lighter. She had sent no ultimatums. No punishments. Only truth. And truth, as it turns out, is a kind of freedom. Jessie walked into the room, handed Sophia a fresh blanket, and sat beside her without asking anything. Because real love doesn't demand. It simply stays. And for the first time in her 27 years, Sophia no longer had to earn her place in the world. She had chosen it. And that was enough. The rise of the phoenix. Exactly 1 year ago, Sophia Wallace lay in a sterile hospital bed, machines blinking frantic rhythms into the dark, her lungs burning, her heart barely holding on. Now, she was lighting candles. Not the perfumed kind that came in glass jars with fancy names, but tall, thin tapers, flickering golden flames that danced against the soft gray walls of her new apartment. Her home. Her sanctuary. 6 people were already seated on floor cushions and mismatched chairs, passing bowls of curry and laughing in the relaxed way people do when they feel safe. Jessie refilled glasses of sparkling cider. Al manned the playlist. They called it Phoenix Day. Sophia had made it up. She didn't care that it wasn't on any calendar. To her, it meant everything. The first flame. It started with a blog post. 3 months after she was discharged from the ICU, once her strength had stabilized and her hands stopped shaking long enough to type, she sat at her new standing desk, courtesy of Al, and wrote the words that had burned in her bones for years. When the people who were supposed to love you don't show up. It was raw, honest, tender without apologizing for the truth. She told the story of lying in a hospital bed, organs failing, while her parents clinked champagne glasses at her brother's engagement party. She didn't name them. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about validation. The post went viral within days. Thousands of comments poured in. Emails, DMs. Strangers said she had put into words what they'd never been able to say out loud. A nurse from Ohio. A single mom in Arizona. A college student with lupus in the UK. It wasn't just the illness they related to, it was the ache of conditional love. The soul-deep yearning to be chosen by the very people who should have done so without being asked. Sophia had unknowingly struck a nerve buried in countless hearts. And that post? It was the match. Guiding light. Sophia didn't stop writing. She created a space, half personal journal, half sanctuary, for people like her. People navigating chronic illness. Complicated families. Healing. She titled it Fireproof. Because she was tired of being flammable. Soon, Fireproof became more than a blog. It became a movement. A place where people weren't told to toughen up, or get over it, or call your parents. They did their best. Sophia answered comments late into the night, read every email, posted resources and encouragement. Some days she was a writer. Other days, a lighthouse keeper. And for the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was leading. The reckoning. Her parents reached out, eventually. They sent flowers. Left voicemails with shaky voices. Caroline once showed up outside her old apartment building with a pie. But Sophia no longer lived there. She was 3 blocks away now, in a sun-drenched one-bedroom painted in warm tones, decorated with soft rugs and defiant plants that refused to die. She didn't block them, but she didn't invite them in either. Instead, she sent an email. If you'd like to meet, it must be at a neutral location. There will be time limits. I need to be heard without being dismissed. And if you cannot offer love without conditions, I will accept distance with respect. Surprisingly, they agreed. The table and the terms. They met at a small cafe near Volunteer Park. It had large windows, herbal tea, and absolutely no memories attached to it. Sophia wore the necklace Jesse had given her after the hospital. Silver, simple, engraved with the word worth. She didn't smile. But she wasn't cold. Caroline and Thomas looked older, as if the weight of years had finally settled onto their shoulders. They talked. They apologized. Fumbled. Defended. Apologized again. Sophia listened. Drew lines. Clarified what could no longer continue. No more minimizing her illness. No more defaulting to Nathan. No more treating her emotions like inconveniences. When it was over, she stood and said, "I'm not cutting you off. I'm cutting myself loose." They didn't understand it fully, but they didn't fight it. And maybe, for now, that was enough. Nathan's letter. A week later, Sophia got a message from her brother. Not a voicemail. Not a forwarded article about productivity. But a real, vulnerable email. "I was blind to it. The dynamic. The way you were left behind. I benefited from it, and I never asked why. I'm in therapy now. I'm trying to be different. I hope someday we can talk, brother to sister, not proxies for our parents." She cried when she read it. Then she replied. And for the first time in their adult lives, they talked about things that mattered. Childhood. Expectations. Regret. It wasn't instant closeness, but it was real. Rebuilding. Sophia painted her new apartment herself. One wall was a bold teal that her mother would have called too loud. Another was adorned with framed blog comments from strangers who said her words saved them from silence. She cooked her own meals, listened to Ella Fitzgerald in the mornings, and practiced yoga from the floor of her living room. Jesse and Elle lived 3 doors down. They had a key. Not because she was fragile, but because they were family. The chosen kind. Phoenix Day. On the anniversary of her near-death, Sophia didn't light a candle in mourning. She lit 12. Each one for a person who had helped pull her from the fire. Jesse, of course. Al, who built her desk and drove her to appointments. Linda, The night nurse who whispered truths and tucked blankets with reverence. Nathan, who was finally learning. And even for herself, for the version of her that stayed alive in the dark when no one was watching. There was food, music, paper crowns, and a silly toast that Jessie insisted they all raise. To the ones who stayed, Sophia said, and to the fire that didn't burn us down, just made us clearer. Epilogue. The quiet moment. Late that night, when everyone had left and the candles had melted into soft wax puddles, Sophia sat by her window and opened her laptop. The blog post draft had been waiting. She typed slowly, pausing between each breath. Healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about claiming the life you were always worthy of, especially when others couldn't see it. If your family failed to show up, it doesn't mean you're unlovable. It means you now get to choose who sits at your table. And that, my friend, is a sacred kind of freedom. Sophia Wallace, Phoenix Day, Year 1. She hit publish. And then sat back in the glow of her living room, her breath steady, her heart full, and her flame, finally, burning bright on her own terms.